I'm going to set this up with re-emphasizing my experience in the firearm industry. I think that's really important to know where I come from on this. Good portion of my adult life, I've been on shooting ranges, designing, building shooting ranges, and understanding people who love guns, understanding people who love the Second Amendment, and I put myself in that category. I've lectured for the NRA. For a couple of years, they sent me around the country teaching people how to build shooting ranges. They gave me an A rating, and so I set that up to let you know where I'm coming from. I think it's really hard to question my credentials with firearms. That being said, let me define for you where I think those of us who love the Second Amendment are making a mistake in this. When there's a shooting like Florida, what happens? Those of us who are big Second Amendment proponents, what do? We kind of step back and go quiet, don't we? And then what do those who hate guns do? They come over here and they say, what are you doing? You're killing our kids. You know, these guns, they're not good. Why don't you do this and this and this and this and this, right? And then what do? We roll our eyes and say, it's not the gun, it's mental illness, right? It won't change anything if you pass this law. It's very unproductive. Remember when we talked about splitting the room with certain things? We have no basis now to make progress on this. What I'm advocating for and what I would like to personally take part of and lead on is that those of us who do understand the Second Amendment, do understand firearms, step forward and be the ones that offer solutions. We understand firearms. We understand these things much better. And we're positioned to say, look, this would work. This would make a significant difference. This one won't work. So I believe if we do two things, we can have a productive dialogue. Let's look for things that actually make a difference. That we can look back and say, if we change this, we would have a better environment. And second, obviously, it can't offend the Second Amendment. Even if we don't care about the Second Amendment, it can't, it's the Second Amendment. So we've got to find things that fit within those two parameters. Now, for a moment, hold that thought and imagine a big giant spreadsheet up here with me. And on the spreadsheet, we've got some categories coming down the side. Guns, mental illness, school security, and other, because there's a bunch of things that don't really fit in those. And then if you go across the top of the spreadsheet, let's put federal government, state government, county, city governments, school boards, communities, neighborhoods, families, right, and individuals. And then say to ourselves, look, let's admit it, there is not one law passed on the federal level that's going to fix this. And sometimes we get into that dialogue, right? Like if you guys would just pass this law, we need lots of checks in all of these boxes, right? We just do. There are things, and I'm here to tell you, I called Keith Rattel, the Provo School District Superintendent. He can check dozens of checks up here. They've done an amazing job. The state has an app called Safe Utah. And you're shaking your heads, you know about it. It saves lives, many of them suicides. It lets our kids work with their peers and connect adults when kids are in trouble. Those are the types of things, right, that we can put checks in these boxes. There were two other things in there. One of them was sponsored by Senator Hatch, and I had actually co-sponsored it. It's called the Stop School Violence Act. It provides grant monies to law enforcement and its school districts to learn and understand early warning signs. Beautiful, right? We know that almost all of these have early warning signs, and we're not picking them up. And so, check, right? We can put a check there. It's actually an interesting another check. A lot of people don't realize this. 20 years ago, and it was funny, it was a Democrat, actually got mad at the CDC for studying guns. They felt like the CDC was studying guns with an agenda to actually prove guns were bad. So Congress slapped their hands, they took away their funding and said, knock it off. In the omnibus bill, we undid that. We said to the CDC, we want good data, right? We need data to make these decisions. Wouldn't we like to know more information about medications, right? Wouldn't we like to know more information about what types of mental illness are leading to these things? Lots of data. So we actually checked 3 boxes with that omnibus bill on a federal level. And so I think, those are like things where I could say, look, make a difference, yes. Defend the Second Amendment, no. There's also something that I would like the state to think about. They thought about it, didn't have enough time during the last legislative session, but I'd love them to have a really deep dialogue about gun violence restraining orders. Let me explain to you what those are. In Florida, we know we let those kids down in multiple ways, right? I mean, it's just tragic. as those news stories started to unfold, how many ways to let these kids down. One of the ways was that dozens of counselors, law enforcement, FBI, knew that this individual was a danger to himself and to other people and didn't use existing laws to make sure he couldn't get a firearm. Wow, where was the breakdown? Think about this. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. If you had a neighbor, a nephew, or even a son who had some problems and had done something they shouldn't have done, do we want to charge that person with a felony? We're very hesitant to do that. Why? Because the moment we throw them in jail, we have started their apprenticeship for being a bad person, right? Not only that, in many cases, if it doesn't get expunged, they now have a felony on their record for the rest of their life. Hard to get a job, right? Many, many problems with this. So there is a natural hesitancy to use some existing laws because of that. This school in Florida actually had a specific program, well-intentioned, to make sure that we weren't sending kids to jail that had committed offenses that may have put them in jail, because they knew that that starts somebody off on a really wrong trajectory. Now, 4 states have used a gun violence restraining order. What that says is that if a law enforcement officer has evidence, they can't do this willy-nilly, has evidence that somebody's a danger to themselves or other people, they can ask a judge for a restraining order to take away firearms or to keep that individual from buying a firearm temporarily, right? And then you get due process built in. So I can't go to Steve White and say, he's a bad guy, take away his guns, right? There's due process built in. In the states that are doing this, they'll tell you it saved thousands of lives, mostly suicides. Our kids get in a bad place for a day or two or a week or two, and parents usually know this, and they can go to law enforcement and say, look, I'm really worried about this. I'm not saying it's an absolute answer. I'm not saying we should do it. I'm saying this is the type of thing we should be talking about. Let's have the state look at this. Why do we want the state to do it, not the federal government? Because we don't want you to go into the federal court for a restraining order. We want you going into the state courts for a restraining order. So it really should be done on a state level. Doing it on a state level also lets you tailor it to our specific needs. We can build in stronger due process if we want. We can build in a higher bar to get the restraining order if we want. So those are the types of things that I'm trying to get my colleagues in the House who do understand firearms to be more aggressive with. There's a gentleman there that owns a gun store and a shooting range with action target equipment. He's a congressman. I've got to get him to join me in this. There are retired chiefs of police. There are Navy SEALs. And what I'd like to do is to change the dialogue and actually be the group that's bringing forth answers. And so we can look our kids in the eyes and say, yes, we're making a difference. And it doesn't have to offend the Second Amendment.